This week's Parsha starts off Reeh, see, that I put in front of you, Bracha and Klala. And my question is as follows. I understand how you could see a lot of things. We're here at the Kaisel, you can see the Kaisel. You could see somebody davening. You could see someone doing a mitzvah. But how do you see Bracha and Klala? How do you see it? Okay, it's true. A person that has great hatzlacha in his life, right? A person that has great success in his life. It might be financially, it might be spiritually. You could see improvement, you could see change. The Ramchal says you could see on a person's face. The face is a window to the neshama. You could see things. But how do you see bracha and kla? How do you see it? So I'd like to suggest as follows. The pasuk in Tehillim says, "Mi isha chavetz chaim oiv yomim liros taiv netzor l'shan chmiras v'sechem medabrim mirma." Who is the person who loves life to see good? Right? Guard your tongue from evil. David HaMelech is teaching us to see good in life. If you want to see good in life, liros taiv, you have to be netzor l'shan chmira. The way you talk about things, the way you describe things, the way you perceive things, as the Gemara says about Eicha. Why does the letter Pei come before the letter Ayin in Eicha? Because we were makdim Pel Ayin. We put our mouth before our eyes. First, you have to analyze and think about something, and then you should express it. If you express yourself before you've analyzed and understood and perceived, then you will most likely be wrong. And not just wrong, but you'll be likely speaking Lashon Hara. Because it's very, very hard to come to a complete and total perception of anything. In fact, if you look in the Torah says about Lashon Hara, it calls it Sheker. And we know that Lashon, in Halacha from the Chavetz Chaim, Lashon Hara is not necessarily Sheker, it's even the truth is Lashon Hara. But the idea here is to get to the complete truth. While something might be factually accurate, that doesn't make it true. Truth is a very deep concept, a complete and total understanding, which really only Hashem is privy to. But we have to try our best to get to that. So, seeing good in life starts with seeing things properly, the ayin before the peh, and then expressing it properly. Right? A person who talks after thinking, as the Ramban says, right, before you open your mouth to say something, think for a second before what you're going to say. And the more that your life is filled with positive talk, positive expression, saying good things, seeing the good in other things, seeing the good in other people, seeing the good in what's going on around you, liros tov, then that person is Chavetz Chaim. That person will have a wonderful, wonderful life because everything around him he sees as good. And this, I believe, is the Kavanas HaTorah. See in front of you the bracha and klala, right? How do you see bracha and how do you see klala, right? And we primarily want to see bracha. We don't want to see klala so much. The way to see bracha is to train yourself, right? Chazal tell us you have to teach your tongue. You have to teach your tongue because the tongue often acts independently, right? It often acts by itself based on our feelings, based on our misconceptions, right? The tongue has to be taught, and you have to train your tongue. And the way you train your tongue is first thinking about something and then expressing yourself, right? And the more you're able to do this, right? Liro's type, the more you see good in things, and the more you express yourself positively about things, and the more you accustom yourself to this, the more you'll see bracha in every single thing that you do, in every nook and cranny, because Hashem's world is full of blessing, it's full of bracha, right? We just miss it because we get caught up with our small issues and our small problems, number one. And number two, it doesn't always look like it, right? We could have a situation which might seem extremely negative. It might be in our health, it might be in our shalom bayis, it might be in our parnasa, it might be with our children, right? A person might think, I have a terrible life, I have a terrible wife, I have a terrible husband, I have terrible children, I have a terrible job, I have terrible health, right? That might all be true, right? It might be difficult, but it's not terrible. It might be difficult, but it's not terrible. As Rosh Galoi told me, right? We have to understand every single second, everything that happens to you is Hashem's infinite kindness. The Tvunaso Ein Mispar. Hashem is infinite wisdom and infinite kindness. And every single thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does is an expression of his infinite wisdom and his infinite kindness. And it's mutal, it's incumbent upon us to approach life in a very, very deep fashion, looking deeply into everything that happens to us and seeing the goods, right? And the good is always there. This is the brilliant comment that Moshe Feinstein makes on Yosef Atzadik when Yosef Atzadik is sold into slavery. Perhaps we cannot think of a more depressing event in the history of the world, of mankind. When Yosef Atzadik is sold by his brothers, the Shvatim, right, whose names were on the Urim Tumim, they were some of the greatest tzaddikim who ever lived. And they paskened and they even included HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Beis Din to kill Yosef, and afterwards they sold him as a slave. And Yosef has been sold as a slave and has been taken down to Egypt, left his father's presence and being sold as a slave to Egypt. And this is probably the most depressing, the most disheartening event that could ever happen to a young man of 17, as Yosef was at the time. Right? But what does Moshe Feinstein say? Or what does Rashi say? Rashi says that unusual occurrence took place. Usually the Arab merchants, they're selling tar. That was the standard commodity that was being transported in those days. But this was an unusual occurrence. Instead of tar, it was perfume. So Moshe Feinstein asks, this is a Nechama for Yosef Atzadik, who's just been sold into slavery by his brothers? Yeah, a terrible, terrible event. Says Rav Moshe, this was a sign from Hashem that Hashem was there, even in this darkest time. It is those most seemingly depressing and disheartening events, right? Hashem was talking to Yosef Atzadik and telling him, I'm here with you. This change from the norm, this change from going from tar to perfume, yeah, was a sign, as it were, from Hashem. It was a divine sign that I'm with you, and everything that's happening is exactly the way I want it to be, according to my infinite wisdom and infinite kindness. Right? And this is called liros tov. Right? If you're able to perceive that, even Rahman al-Islam, Chas v'Shalom, a person should never be sold by his brothers into slavery. Right? Should never have any situation like that. But we all have difficult moments and we all have difficulties. And the secrets to steiging, secret to growing from such difficulties is liros tov, is to see the good in everything and to look for it. And sometimes you have to look very, very hard, as was the case with Yosef Atzadik, because from the outer trappings it looks very, very sad and very, very bad. Right? But you will, as says Rav Moshe Feinstein, you'll always find it. It's like the painting. If you look at any painting, on the corner, on the side, there's a little mark that's a sign who the artisan is. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the same way. Everything he does in this world, he leaves a little mark that this is from me. And the worse it looks, as we always say from the Lashon of the Zohar, the more darkness is, the more light there is, because the good is being hidden by a very thick peel. And the more HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates a painting, right, as Chazal tell us, Hashem is the master painter of the world, right? And you can be sure that if he made a master painting, right, which looks very, very bad, right, this is a master painting from Hashem, because the worse it looks, the better it is. And you'll find in the corner a little signature, just like Yosef found. Yosef found the perfume instead of the tar. So too in every situation in life. If you look carefully, you'll see it's marked with a Kadosh Baruch Hu signature. And when you find that signature, it's a source of great light and great hope and great consolation and great inspiration. Hashem should help us all to find in our lives the marks of Hashem's presence and to see them with clarity, liros toiv, and to be zoiche to see the great bracha that Hashem has planted in our lives and in everything around us. The world is overflowing with bracha. You just have to see it. As Chaim Brisker said, where Hashem, wherever you let him in, the more you open your hearts and your eyes to the bracha of Hashem, the more you'll see it and experience it. Amen. Ken Son.